Goku and Vegeta's first fight during the Saiyan Saga is easily one of the most iconic and memorable ones in the entire franchise, and for good reason. The fight itself is exciting, it's got plenty of twists, Goku and Vegeta push themselves to their absolute limits, and the scene where Goku and Vegeta exchange words right before they start fighting beautifully sets up the conflict at hand and contrasts these two characters perfectly. Wait, what? The English dubs of Dragon Ball Z completely changed this moment? Well then, in that case, it's time for us to once again take a look at the English dubs of Dragon Ball Z in order to determine how they changed one of the franchise's most memorable and famous moments. But that's not all, because we're also going to take a look at the English Dragon Ball Z Kai dub and the Spanish Latin American dub, give each one of these dubs a score, and at the end of it all, declare a winner. Let's get into it. Hey guys, Tony here. So I'm on the road to 5,000 subscribers. I am more than halfway there. Help me reach that goal. If you're into in-depth analyses of Dragon Ball and other anime from the perspective of a language nerd like myself, somebody that actually reads, speaks, and understands Japanese, and has spent way too much time studying Japanese, well, you found the right channel. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. The moment we're going to be taking a look at today takes place in episode 30 of the Dragon Ball Z anime. It's the scene where Goku and Vegeta talk to each other right before they start fighting for the first time. As always, we're going to start things off with my translation of the original Japanese. I see. So this is the place you have chosen as your grave. You should rejoice, for you, a low-class warrior, are about to have a super elite toy with you. Upon their birth, a Saiyan's ability as a warrior is assessed. Trash like you is sent off to planets that lack any strong opponents. In a word, you are a reject. Thanks to that, I was able to come to Earth. I should be grateful. Besides, if they give it their all, even a reject might be able to surpass an elite. That is a good joke. Well then, I shall show you that there are walls that cannot be overcome, no matter how hard you try. I know, guys, I'm really good at the voice acting. In all seriousness, though, last time I did the crazy voice acting, only one person actually left a negative comment, so I guess you guys either mostly enjoyed it or just tolerated it. Sorry, or thank you, or both, I guess. Anyway, let's get to the analysis, because before we get to the English dubs, I want to point out some interesting things that are going on here in the original Japanese text. First of all, it's important to point out why this short exchange between Goku and Vegeta is so significant. Yeah, it's short, and maybe if you're not paying too close attention, it may just seem like more talking before a fight, but there's a lot going on here. For one, it sets up what this fight is about. It makes this fight mean something more than just, I'm gonna defeat you, no, I'm gonna defeat you. And second, it highlights one of the core themes of Dragon Ball, but I'll get back to that in just a moment. In terms of what this fight is about, well, it's about two characters that have two very different philosophies. Vegeta thinks he's going to win because he is confident in his abilities. He is arrogant. Why is that? Because he was born strong. He is a quote-unquote super elite. He does not believe that any amount of training or effort or hard work could result in low-class trash like Goku defeating him. And Vegeta's beliefs are emphasized by the way he speaks to Goku. For example, unlike Goku, Vegeta doesn't contract any of his words. As you may know, in the original Japanese, Goku is known for using a very rough and informal speech style. As part of this, he often uses a lot of contractions. And he does that in this scene too. Just as a quick example, we can take a look at Surya. This is a contracted form of Sureba, which in this context means something like if I were to or if you were to. And as I mentioned earlier, Vegeta doesn't do anything like this. So it's a very severe contrast. Vegeta says some horrible things to Goku, but he says it in a very clear and proper manner with no contractions or anything that comes off as non-standard proper Japanese. Whereas Goku speaks in his very informal, non-standard style. But that's not all, because there's other linguistic choices that Vegeta makes that highlight that difference between Vegeta and Goku. There's also the second person pronoun that Vegeta uses. In this exchange, he uses Kisama to refer to Goku. Now, kisama is basically an equivalent of you in Japanese, but here's the thing. In Japanese, there's multiple first-person pronouns, there's multiple second-person pronouns, and some of them are very polite, some of them are very informal. Kisama is a very rude and aggressive second-person pronoun. You would only use this if you're talking down to someone, and that's what Vegeta does. In fact, among Japanese Dragon Ball fans, Kisama is strongly associated with Vegeta. If you were to ask a random Japanese Dragon Ball fan what second-person pronoun Vegeta tends to use, I would say that there's a very, very high likelihood that they would say Kisama. Another interesting thing to point out is Vegeta's usage of the phrase Yorokobu ga ii. I translated this as you should rejoice. This basically just means you should be happy. However, you're probably not going to hear this in daily conversation. This phrase has a very literary vibe to it. Most people would never use this in daily life, but it works really well for Vegeta here because it adds to that whole I'm better than you vibe that he's giving off. And so that's why I translated it as you should rejoice rather than just you should be happy. And then there's also these somewhat high-level vocabulary words that Vegeta uses here. For example, there's kensa, which means something like examine or assess, and soshitsu, which means something like aptitude or ability. These are words that any Japanese adult would understand. However, there are easier ways to say these words, and these are also not the kinds of words that Goku would ever use, thus further emphasizing the divide that exists between Goku and Vegeta. And lastly, there's the insults that Vegeta uses to refer to Goku. First, there's kuzu yaro. Kuzu means trash. Yaro is an impolite way to refer to somebody, so basically he's just calling Goku trash. Yet again, this emphasizes how Vegeta looks down at Goku. And then there's perhaps the most interesting insult that Vegeta uses. Ochi kobore. I think this perfectly encapsulates Vegeta's attitude towards Goku. I translated this as reject, and there's nothing wrong with that translation. You could also go with loser, and there's other possible translations. However, neither reject nor loser capture the nuance of ochikobore. That's because perhaps a more accurate translation of ochikobore is something like leftover scraps. Ochikobore is a very visual word. The ochi part of ochikobore means fall, and then the kobore part of ochikobore means something like spill or to fall out of. So just hearing that word brings to mind images of, for example, food falling from a plate and then the dog eats that food. Like, these are the leftover scraps that nobody wants that are thrown to the floor. So I would argue that ochikobore has more of an impact than just reject or loser. And again, it totally highlights the hatred and contempt that Vegeta has towards low-class Saiyans like Goku. Sadly, a lot of the stuff that I pointed out here gets totally lost in translation. For example, neither English or Spanish has the same variety of pronouns as Japanese, so it can be tricky to translate things like kisama. Also, the whole contrast that exists in the original Japanese between Vegeta's very clear and proper speech style and Goku's very rough and informal speech style is completely gone from the English and Spanish dubs. So yes, it's a shame that not every single aspect of the original Japanese can be brought over to the dubs, but that's how these things are. You can't do that. When you dub something into another language, you have to leave some things out. That's just how it is. But anyway, hopefully now you understand a little bit better that this exchange isn't just about what Goku and Vegeta say, it's about how they say it. All this serves to set up beautifully the ultimate payoff that happens at the end of the fight. Remember, at the end of the fight with Vegeta, Goku is completely immobilized. For all intents and purposes, Vegeta defeats Goku. However, because of Yajirobe, Krillin, and Gohan, the Earth side ends up winning. In other words, even though Vegeta wins the fight, Goku wins the argument. Remember, the exchange is about Vegeta saying that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you cannot surpass somebody who is born into status, somebody of a high level like him, somebody who is of the super elite. Training means nothing, effort means nothing. It's all about who you are when you're born. And even though Vegeta is so confident at the beginning, at the end, he is forced to retreat, thus showing that Goku was right. He achieved what he achieved because he was sent to Earth. And don't you dare bring up Dragon Ball Minus. We do not talk about that here on this channel. But anyway, what Vegeta and Goku say to each other at the beginning of the fight is paid off at the end of the fight beautifully. And as I alluded to earlier, it also highlights one of the core concepts of Dragon Ball. If you try really hard, if you put in all your effort, you may be able to achieve incredible things, even some things that may have seemed impossible when you first started on your journey. And this is something that keeps recurring throughout Dragon Ball. So if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm going to make it really clear here. I love this moment between Goku and Vegeta. It's so short, and yet it does so much. It encapsulates who Vegeta is as a character, who Goku is as a character, and basically what Dragon Ball is all about. And so it should come as no surprise that the English dubs of Dragon Ball Z completely ruined this scene. Check out the Ocean dub.
Kakarot, you and I would make a good team. With Nappa gone, I could use a good man. There's no one in the universe who could touch us. We would rule the planets, and you could have anything you wanted. Anything. Nothing would be out of your grasp. Well, what do you say, Kakarot?
Look, I've got everything I ever wanted right here on Earth. All I need is my family. Besides, I've seen how you treat your partners. There's not a lot of job security.
All right then, so be it. You had your chance.
What we have here in the Ocean dub is an absolute travesty. They turned a standout moment in Dragon Ball that connects to so much of what Dragon Ball is into something that is absolutely generic and forgettable. This is not Vegeta. This is not Goku. What we have here is a cookie cutter villain talking to a cookie cutter hero, giving the hero an opportunity to be a hero. Vegeta basically says, "Join me and we'll rule the universe."
Join me and we can rule the galaxy together.
The only reason he says this is so that Goku can have the opportunity to say, "No, I wouldn't do that. I will not give in to temptation because I am the hero of this story." To make things even worse, this doesn't even make sense within the context of the story. Even if Goku would have teamed up with Vegeta, they would certainly not have been untouchable. Frieza is still out there. And yes, at this point in the story, Toriyama hasn't introduced Frieza. However, Vegeta should know at this point in time that even with Goku at his side, they would be no match for Frieza. So either Vegeta is lying or he's an idiot. And I know there's a decent chance somebody in the comments might say, "Oh, but you could interpret this as Vegeta trying to trick Goku." That's nonsense, and that's just you trying to somehow justify what is going on here. Also, Vegeta wouldn't do that. Yeah, he's an arrogant, egotistical maniac, but he's not a liar. He's not a scammer. He wouldn't be saying nonsense to Goku just to sucker punch him or something like that. So basically, it's like the people that adapted this looked at the original Japanese and thought, what can we do to negate everything that is good about this scene? So what would I rate the Ocean dub? Well, there's almost nothing here that remains from the original Japanese, so I'm gonna have to give this version a 0.5 out of 10. Next up, we have the Funimation redub.
Kakarot, I have a proposition for you. I'm only going to say this once, so listen carefully. I, Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, would like to offer you, Kakarot, the opportunity to stand beside me in this conquest. With Nappa gone, I could use a good man. Think about it. We would rule the planets. You could have anything you desired. There's no one in the universe that could touch us. Nothing would be out of your grasp. Well, what do you say, Kakarot?
I have everything I could ever want right here on Earth. So I'll have to say, no thanks. Besides, I've seen how you treat your partners. Not much job security.
All right then, so be it. You had your chance.
And this is almost exactly the same as the Ocean dub. There's really not much for me to say. Everything that I said for the Ocean dub applies here. There is one notable change though. In this version, Vegeta says that he's the Prince of the Saiyans. This is a rather weird change because it isn't revealed that Vegeta is the Prince of the Saiyans until he fights Dodoria on Namek. So yeah, it's not like it's wrong to have Vegeta say that he's the Prince of the Saiyans, but also, why? Why throw that in there? Just leave it as it is. So what would I rate this version? Well, it's pretty much exactly the same, so I'm just gonna go with the same score, 0.5 out of 10. And now let's go with the Dragon Ball Kai, or as it's known in the US, Dragon Ball Z Kai dub. Please save us. Give us something better, Kai.
Interesting. Of all the places on your planet, you chose this as your grave site. You should feel lucky. Not every low-class warrior gets the chance to spar with a super elite like myself. Not long after Saiyans are born, their skills as a soldier are tested. The scum whose scores are ranked the lowest are sent to the outer worlds where the opponents are weak. Much like you were, Kakarot. In other words, you were cast out like a dog.
Yes, and as a result, I was lucky enough to come here to Earth. I'm grateful for that. Besides, maybe even a lower-class outcast can surpass an elite if he puts his mind to it.
That's a nice attempt at a joke. Now let me show you a wall you will never have the ability to scale through effort alone.
This is really, really good. Not only is it accurate, they also make some really nice creative choices that I will highlight. But before we get to the good points, I do want to point out one thing that I didn't like. In this version, Vegeta says that low-class warriors are sent to the outer planets. The word outer is not used in the original Japanese. In fact, there's absolutely no mention of where the planets that the low-class warriors are sent to are located. Now, this isn't a huge deal. It's not like when Vegeta called Goku's father a brilliant scientist in the Ocean dub. But I do wish that they had translated this a little bit differently because, again, they're introducing information that wasn't there in the original Japanese. As for the creative choices that I really liked, well, that all comes down to the insults that Vegeta uses. In the original Japanese, Vegeta calls low-class warriors like Goku Kuzuyaro. Basically, he's just calling them trash. In this version, he calls them scum. Totally valid translation, and I think this goes to emphasize just a little bit more how much contempt Vegeta has for Goku and low-class Saiyans. And then there's the Ochikobore line, which remember, I translated as reject. In this version, they get really creative, and they have Vegeta say that Goku was cast out like a dog. Even though this is not a one-for-one translation of Ochikobore, I think that this has much more impact than just saying that Goku is a reject. And again, it really emphasizes just how much Vegeta thinks he is better than Goku. So what would I rate the Kai dub? Well, I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10. And now, let's look at our last contender, straight from Mexico, the Spanish Latin American dub.
Ahora comprendo. Has escogido este lugar para que sea tu tumba. Debes sentirte muy afortunado, porque un guerrero de clase baja tendrá el honor de jugar un poco con el mejor guerrero. Cuando los Saiyajin nacen, son examinados para saber todas sus aptitudes. Aquellos miserables que tengan un nivel muy bajo, como tú, son mandados a planetas como este donde no existan enemigos fuertes. Eso quiere decir que eres un perdedor.
Entonces esa es la razón por la que estoy en la Tierra. Debo agradecértelo. Y además, si un perdedor hace muchos esfuerzos, quizás pueda sobrepasar el poder que tiene un guerrero distinguido.
Qué broma tan graciosa. Te mostraré la gran pared que no podrás sobrepasar por mayor que sea tu esfuerzo.
Again, we have another really, really good adaptation here. However, I will say it is just a little bit plain. For example, Ochikobore, I translated it as reject, and the Kai dub translated it as cast out like a dog. In this version, they translated Ochikobore to perdedor, which means loser. Nothing wrong with that translation. It is totally valid, it is accurate, but it is just a little bit boring. So what would I rate the Spanish Latin American dub? I'm going to give this one a 9.5 out of 10 as well. So for the first time ever, we have not one, but two ties. First up, we have the Ocean and Funimation redubs. They both got a 0.5 out of 10 because they completely missed the mark. And then we have the Dragon Ball Z Kai dub and the Spanish Latin American dub that prove it is 100% possible to do a competent, entertaining, and accurate dub of Dragon Ball Z. And that makes me happy. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, well, I have good news because I have an entire playlist of Dragon Ball Z dub comparison videos. So go check that out now. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see ya in the next one.